The two existing game modes of Total Warhammer multiplayer have their own problems. For traditional land battles, the lack of objectives allow a bunch of kiting strategies and corner camping, making the game very unenjoyable for the other player. And for domination mode, a smaller starting army as well as the reinforcement mechanics makes the game mode a little bit more disadvantaged for certain army factions such as Cathay and Nurgle. So the community has decided to come up with a brand new battle format, combining the strengths of both game modes, and here we are having a brand new format of battles. Today we will be showcasing this battle sent in by Strat Games, playing in the hybrid format with a full army of 12,400 gold funds on both ends. Still, they will be primarily fighting for the control of objectives. But one thing different from domination mode is that no reinforcements are allowed. What you see on the battlefield is what you get. That means the best way to win the game to capture all objectives is to kill off your opponent's entire army, and then slowly cap every single objective and achieve victory. But still, that doesn't mean that you can spam the cheesiest army to kill off your opponent. The sole winning condition in this game is still to get those 5,000 victory tickets instead of killing your opponent's army. In that sense, even if you have tabled your opponent's army, if you fail to capture enough objectives and secure the victory tickets in time, you will still lose the game. So cheesy strats like flyer spams will be limited due to the lack of capture power. Instead, you have to strike a balance between killing power and capture power. Just like both armies here, spamming infantry for more objective control. For the Ogre Kingdom side, we have a bunch of Nobblers at the front line, and at the back Ogre Bulls with Iron Fists, mixed in with Man-Eaters with Iron Fists, for that missile block chance to protect themselves from the Tinge firepower. And on the flanks, we have some Gorgers for flanking maneuvers. At the back, a bunch of Mornfang Cavalry with Iron Fists supporting a Slaughtermaster of Beasts. While for the Tinge army side, we have a front line of Blue Horrors of Tinge supported by a bunch of Forsaken in the forest, and at the back, spawns of Tinge and also Pink Horrors providing additional firepower. In the skies, Screamers of Tinge supporting a Lord of Change Exalted version with the Lore of Tinge. And that's basically for the army builds. Let's get the battle started and see how the hybrid battle mode plays out. This game takes place on the new domination map, the Battle of Itza, a really splendid looking map with all the background, the mountains, the waterfalls, and in the skies we have the floating pyramids of the Lizardman charging up by the land pyramids. Just looks spectacularly amazing. Anyways, back to the battle itself. Both armies are pushing for the middle. They're not exactly going for the objective capture, and instead, they will be rushing for each other's front line, as during the initial stages of this new hybrid game mode, it's all about eliminating your opponent's forces instead of capturing objectives, so as to securing map control in the late game by having simply more units on the field. Both armies clashing forward, there is not a lot of terrain, not a lot of choke points on this map, so it is just a very straightforward clash, as both front lines are pushing forward, Blue Horrors opening fire at the incoming Ogre Bulls using their Iron Fist to block off some of that fire, and charges straight into the Blue Horrors formations, supported by the Nobblers. They will be overloading this fragile front line of the Tinge army, while at the back, the Pink Horrors are just trying their best to do as much damage as soon as possible, before the fragile Blue Horror speed bump front line eventually breaks, hoping to focus down all these lightly armored Man-Eaters and Ogre Bulls. But at the back, the Mornfang Cavalry are charging in using their massive bulldoze their way over these Blue Horrors, and the Tinge army's further front line is now buckling under the massive pressure. Although some Gorgers are now being shut down by all those Pink Horror firepower, their armor is almost non-existent, so perfect target for the Tinge missile crossfire. But the front line buckling, with the Mornfang Cavalry charging into the back line, the Tinge player is now forced to pull out some of the Forsaken and the spawns of Tinge hidden in the forest, hoping to use this better melee force to pin down the Mornfang Cavalry, as well as fend off the rest of the Ogre Bull infantry and Nobblers. Pink Horrors, despite not being primarily a melee combatant, they are still holding in the battle okay, as they do not break due to them being demons and whatnot. And there's even a full unit of Pink Horror being salvaged, able to position themselves into a firing position, while the Exalted Lord of Change has been roaming around the battlefield, rear charging into a bunch of Ogre units, hoping to do some back-breaking charges with the rear charge penalty. Still, the Tinge infantry forces are crumbling as the Ogre Bulls, Gorgers, Man-Eaters, and Mournfang Cavalry just overloaded all those pink horrors and now pushing straight for the Forsaken, who are now wavering. Forsaken, despite being a decent melee combatant, they do not have the unbreakable effect as the other demon units, and so they will be relying on the spawn of Tinge to hold back this tide, this whole fist of ogre units concentrated into one spot of the battlefield, allowing the pink horrors to start shooting into the fray, doing some chip damage with their non-armor piercing fire. But still, with the infantry front line being basically obliterated by the ogre army, the Tinge player has no choice but to pull back all these pink horrors, hoping to find another firing spot for the pink horrors, while the melee units continue to buy time, but it's not quite successful right now. As the Mournfang Cavalry now getting into the backlines again, Lord of Change unable to dive into this huge blob of ogre units as it is pretty much suicide. While the Ogre Bulls in the front are being slowly dragged down by a combination of blue horrors, spawns, and pink horrors. Over here, the Forsakens are still fighting from the Tinge side, and with the supplement of Screamers diving down into the rear of all these Mournfang Cavalry, the Mournfang Cavalry being a large armored unit, are taking massive charge damage from these Screamers with their anti-large armor piercing damage. Also with the Exalted Lord of Change diving into combat as well, the Mournfang Cavalry are not having a best time, but a spell debuff from the Ogre side was able to keep them alive a little longer by debuffing the stats of the Tinge army. Still, they will be buckling as the Mournfang Cavalry is now being terrified by the presence of the Exalted Lord of Change, while on the other flank, the Slaughtermaster diving into combat against a bunch of pink horrors, silencing them for now, but the Ogre Bulls and the Ogre units seems to be losing steam for their offensive push. Though the one good news for the Ogre Kingdom's army is that they have captured Objective 1, able to get some victory tickets ticking in, and at this point, it is pretty key for both armies to secure all these objectives as we are approaching late game right now, and the outcome of the battle can be swinging in the favor of either side. With the Slaughtermaster Lord of Beasts summoning a Manticore, the Manticore will be dropping down into the fight, but unfortunately, the Flying Charge attack bug strikes, as the Manticore is now stuck mid-air, unable to land any attacks due to the spawn of Tinge occupying the spot they're supposed to land, and now they're just stuck in a permanent limbo, unable to do any attack or receiving any attacks, essentially wasting most of the potential from this Manticore summon. Which is honestly a rather bad news for the Ogres, as their units are dwindling in terms of size and numbers. In contrast, the Tinge army has a large reserve of healthy Screamers. Supported by the Exalted Lord of Change, they are roaming around the battlefield, picking off these tattered Mournfang Cavalry and also tattered Gorgers, and in the front line, the Man-Eaters and Ogre Bulls are also dwindling, being dragged down by the attrition damage in the combat. The regrouped Forsaken will be charging back into combat, routing all these Man-Eaters and Ogre Bulls, despite having the Furrow Manticore supporting, leaving only a single unit of Man-Eaters supporting the fight, while the spawn of Tinge will be pinning down the Slaughtermaster. At an overview of the battlefield, despite making a strong push, the Ogre army actually loses most of their forces, while the Tinge army still have a bunch of Screamers that can easily pick off all these Ogres scattered around the battlefield, and there are even some pink horrors regrouping in various positions, now focusing fire onto the Ogres, Man-Eaters. Especially they're shooting at the rear that the missile block chance would not be effective. Furthermore, the Lord of Change is still very, very healthy, providing fire support with the spells, using that pink fire to just snipe out a bunch of Ogre units, and with this massive charge attack converging onto a single remaining Man-Eater unit, even the Ogres' most elite would not be holding for too long. So the Ogres will be regrouping the units, maneuvering around, hoping to get another rear charge. But how effective this rear charge can be is rather questionable, with both units extremely depleted and wavering in leadership. So now let us fast forward, as the brawl is rather messy right now, with the pink horrors shooting into the blob and the spawn of Tinge tying down the Slaughtermaster, hoping to grind him down in melee combat. And the Ogre's units scattered around the battlefield are unable to regroup into an effective resistance. But this is where the sneaky part of the play comes in, as there is a single Nobbler unit regrouped and now occupying this Objective 2. sneakily capping as the Tinge army does not have any units able to counter this kind of capture. Sure, the Screamers can rout off the Nobblers, but seems that the Tinge player is focusing in the main brawl and unable to spot them. Secondly, they need to have some infantry to occupy this capture spot to counteract that Nobbler capture. But unfortunately, all the Pink Horrors and the Forsaken are gone. Only some of them really tattered remaining on the other side of the battlefield, unable to get there in time. With the Nobblers capturing the objective uninterrupted, we can see that the Tinge player neglected them and trying to focus down the Ogre leadership instead. Still, the Slaughtermaster, despite fighting alone without any unit support, is holding right now. Due to the fact that this is a domination map and does not have a balance of power bar, there is no army losses, allowing the Ogres to keep fighting, using these regrouped Nobbler unit to just occupy yet another capture point. So the Ogre army, despite losing most of their forces, actually got a massive lead. The Tinge army, with only a single tattered unit of Pink Horror capturing Objective 1, this might not actually capture in time for the Tinge army. The Slaughtermaster is still fighting against a bunch of spawns of Tinge, and the spawns are not gonna go anywhere soon, while the Lord of Change is desperately needed in just sniping out the Slaughtermaster and then move over to shut down the other Nobbler units, who is just sneakily capping yet still, and now with the free cap pouring in victory tickets for the Ogre Kingdoms, and only one Pink Horror slowly capturing Objective 1. The Ogres are actually having the upper hand right now. They desperately need to hold on to all the objectives so that the Tinge army, unable to capture the objectives, will lose the battle. So let us fast forward to see if the Tinge army is able to struggle and wrestle all these objectives from the Ogre Kingdoms, but it seems that it is a rather futile attempt. With a second Manticore Summon occupying some of these Pink Horrors, the Ogre Kingdoms was able to deny the Pink Horrors from capturing this objective in time, approaching really close to victory. With over 4,000 tickets, Slaughtermaster routed for temporarily, but this is a little bit too late for the Tinge army, as the Pink Horrors unable to capture the objectives in time with their tattered units. The Ogre Kingdoms will be occupying 5,000 tickets, achieving victory, turning the tables from an almost guaranteed defeat. Now that we're at the post-battle screen, let's talk about this new hybrid game mode. After seeing this replay that is sent in by Strat Games and also played against Cry is Free, I tried a few games in this hybrid mode against Strat Games himself, and I find that this is a really good balance between the land battles and the domination mode. With capture points being installed on the map, it is great for dealing with the cheese strategies like the corner camping and also draw kiting. So that basically eliminates the need to enforce an attacking rule, because if you go for those passive methods of playing, well, you're gonna lose the game because you won't be able to capture any objectives. And the biggest problem of domination mode is also being resolved by having the full army deployed, instead of having a bunch of reserve trickling in small doses. And also cheesy but overpowered strategies like, say, single entity spams and also flyer spams will be largely limited due to the need of balancing capturing power and killing power. If you try to spam flyers and single entities, well, you don't have the capture power you need to occupy the objectives, and if you lose all your ground forces, you simply do not have any means to take back any objectives, even if your flyers are still alive and kicking, which adds a lot more stuff to consider when you're building your army. It actually brings the whole Total War Warhammer franchise a little closer to how tabletop games for Warhammer are played out recently. Like, say, 40k and Age of Sigmar. It's not necessarily close to Warhammer Fantasy, but the fact that it allows for different styles of play, for objective capture, and also for killing your opponent's army once and for all, I really like this variety added to the gameplay. Anyways, let's quickly run through the army performances. For the Tinge army brought by Cry is Free, you can see that they have the superior force of remaining units. You can see that the Exalted Lord of Change is basically full health. There is still a single unit of very healthy Screamers. Some Pink Horrors are still alive, but the problem is that they were not able to capture the objectives in time in the end. Cry is Free was really concentrated in using those forces to snipe out their opponent's units, just spamming those missiles from the Lord of Change, and also using those screamers to great effect hunting down the Mournfang cavalry and the ogre units. But unfortunately, the flyers were not able to capture any objectives and allowed the ogre kingdoms to turn the tables, flip the odds by having the remaining infantry, some of these sneaky nobblers, to capture the objectives and got a ticket win. While the ogre kingdoms, you can see that not all of their units got a lot of value. The ogre bulls did poorly in combat. The nobblers didn't really do much other than having the decisive capturing of objectives. Mournfang cavalry being hunted down by spawns and screamers, the perfect counter to the heavy cavalry of the ogre kingdoms. So in the end, they didn't really earn back that much value, and Gorgers, after that big nerf, under the crossfire of all the pink horrors, just get shot to pieces. By utilizing their opponent's neglect in the objectives, Dread Games was able to win the game by securing all the domination capture points, sacrificing their army, but in the end securing victory. Now before we end this video, just want to ask you as a viewer, what do you think about this new hybrid game mode? Some content creators have already started experimenting with this game mode, and personally, I like it a lot. It basically solved the issues on both domination and also land battles, and I feel like it has a lot of potential for different kind of meme builds, great tournament games, and I'm excited to see what lies ahead in this new game mode. It's still a very new thing, and not a lot of testing has been done, but I think I'm gonna play more in this game mode because it is a great improvement from what we had for Total War Warhammer as a franchise. If you have any ideas and thoughts, feel free to leave a comment down below, let me know. And if you have any replays that you want to showcase, feel free to drop by my Discord or send me an email with the replay file attached. I'll be sure to check them out. And that's basically it for today. Thank you for watching. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe to get notified every time I upload a new video. I'll be posting even more hybrid game mode videos in the future, and also of course some regular replays sometimes, wild army builds. And yeah, that's basically it for today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Tactical Lich, signing out.